Welcome back to Luke's Homebrew. This is the fourth installment of the tier ranking list of the classes in D&D 5e. If you haven't seen the monk rating yet, I recommend checking it out either up in the corner or down in the description. But today we are going to break down and discuss and rank the cheaters in your local wizard high school, the Warlocks. Warlocks were added into Dungeons & Dragons in 2004 in the complete Arcane sourcebook for D&D 3.5. They are the newest class to Dungeons & Dragons as a whole, and in my opinion, a welcome addition. Warlocks are personally my favorite class, as they open up a whole can of worms for world building, RP opportunities. That being said though, the remainder of this video will remain objective to the relative power and opportunities granted by the Warlock in combat, exploration, and RP tiers of play. Since 2004, the Warlock has maintained the relative theme of being a servant to an eldritch being, whether that is to a demon, fae, celestial, or great old one. However, while the two main usages of the Warlock in 5e are similar in theme, they have a few stark differences that I found to be rather noteworthy. In 3.5, Eldritch Blast spell, as we know it, was actually a class ability, and in 5e it was adapted to be, in quotes, an optional choice. Additionally, Warlocks were originally a D6 hit die caster, and used intelligence as their core statistic rather than charisma. And as noted by Treant Monk, the original design for the 5e Warlock was meant to follow the same path, but it was changed to be charisma to meet their new ideas for the class. Speaking of, let's go into detail about the 5e version of Warlock, where it's powerful, where it tends to drop off, and what you can do to combat that to the best of your ability. You start by having some proficiencies in some armor and weapons, which is useful, though not exciting, as the Armor Shadows invocation negates any light armor choices, and most simple weapons in 5e are just not as stylish as some of the martial weapons, though nonetheless, they are appreciated. Additionally, you gain proficiency in Wisdom and Charisma saving throws, which is good for maintaining control of your character while in combat against Dominate Person, Dominate Monster, and various other spells that seek to limit how much you can play. Though, that being said, charisma saves are relatively uncommon, and only really being provoked by a few handful spells, and just ghosts and vampires off the top of my head. At first level, a Warlock in 5th edition gains access to Pact Magic and their subclass feature. Pact Magic is an obscure and unique form of magic that is the only kind of its form, and it grants the user a lower amount of spell slots, but the ability to regain them during a short rest. As for the subclass options, you actually gain quite an extensive list containing Archfey, Fiend, and Great Old One within the player's handbook, and 6 DLC subclasses containing the Celestial, Fathomless, Genie, Hexblade, Undead, and Undying patrons. All of these subclasses are relatively good to one another, though the Hexblade, Genie, and Fathomless personally stick out to me as being some of the most powerful or at least interesting options. At 2nd level and beyond, you may start picking up 2 Eldritch invocations and eventually have up to 8 by 18th level. Most of these invocations are unique and can be considered miniature feats, which allow each and every Warlock to be vastly different from one another. Though if you do plan on using Eldritch Blast extensively, I recommend at least picking up Agonizing Blast to allow you to add your Charisma modifier to the damage rolls. Other than that, Devil's Sight, Eldritch Sight, Mask of Many Faces, Misty Visions, and Whispers of the Grave are my personal favorites to pick. Next, at 3rd level, Warlocks gain the Pact feature. You can choose between the Chain, the Tome, the Blade, and the Talisman. Each of these are fundamental changes to your character, and truly define what your playstyle will be throughout the rest of the campaign. I would personally rank them as Tome being the best, with Chain, Talisman, and Blade following suit. Though there are specific Eldritch packs that you can, or invocations that you can choose to really boost the powers of these packs, such as Eldritch Smite, specifically for the Pact of the Blade. From 3rd level until 11th, you just gain bonuses to your spell slot levels, number of invocations, and the number of spells you know. At 11th level, you gain the Mystic Arcanum feature, which reads at first as a powerful ability for the Warlock to gain, though it simply exists to keep the Warlock relatively on par with the other full casters within 5e, as it only grants you a 6th level spell, a 7th, 8th, and 9th level spell that you can cast once per long rest. Come 20th level, some of the other full casters can even outpace you within that margin, which is an idea that we will return to soon. Finally, at 20th level, you gain the Eldritch Master feature to spend 1 minute and regain all of your expended spell slots, which, at this level, is 4 5th level spell slots. It is definitely a welcome feature, though it is rarely used as 5e is rather unsupported for higher level play. Overall, the Warlock is very strong throughout the first 3 to 5 levels of its class, and is a stellar class to dip into for a strong power boost, with a little bit of commitment. And in my opinion, that was kind of its intended design. As you leave the first tier and begin delving into the higher tiers of play, from 5th level to 20th level, you are slowly outclassed by all of your fellow spellcasting classes, and remaining slightly more powerful than strictly martial classes until roughly 15th level. I think that WotC took a risk with Pact Magic, and on paper it reads very powerful and interesting. It's a new take on spellcasting, though in practice, the lack of spell slots that Warlocks get really shoehorns them into relying on Eldritch Blast to be dealing competitive damage, and are generally subpar in all other forms of utility other than the obvious standout, which is Illusion Magic, because of those invocations. If you are looking for a few magic items to really buff any Warlock that you are playing, I highly recommend Illusionist Bracers, because those combo very well with Eldritch Blast. Otherwise, a Rod of the Pact Keeper is also an excellent choice, but frankly, any spell or invocation or magic item that allows you to be able to cast freely or do things without delving into your 4 spell slots that you have access to is definitely always a very good option for you to pick as a Warlock. But while Warlocks are my favorite class personally, these problems with progression reduce the Warlock from being an A tier class to a C tier class when it comes to playing one in a campaign that lasts quite a while. In a low level one-shot, this may be different. Because of all of these flaws with how Warlock is unable to compete outside of 5th level, my final ranking for Warlock is C, just average. I personally really love the Warlock, and I've begun working on my own revision of the Warlock's progression that I am currently playtesting, and it's proving to be very well done. So if you would like to hear more of my thoughts on Warlock, or see my variant Warlock that I'm working on, please leave a like or comment down below saying why. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.